Yeah, so thinking of a criminal, murderous uh, psychopathology of granted authorities at the time, execution. Uh, I myself, there's apocrypha gospels which were never admitted in the canon, and the canon essentially there's a bunch of papyrus scrolls, and they get together as a committee, and then they say, well, let's put this papyrus manuscript into the canon, which is the index of biblical books. The apocrypha are um, it's not necessarily that they're removed um, on the grounds that they're less or more dubious than books that are remained. I mean, uh, my grandmother, one of her Bibles included in the old in the Old Testament books First and Second Maccabees, and a book called Bel and the Dragon, which was genuinely a story in the Jewish Torah about a dragon. Um, so this committee get together, and for an assortment of motives, they say, well, let's include or remove this or that book from the canon, and that there's from their point of view, be like, well, in getting your seeking to get your message across, you're choosing to add add these books. Obviously, if Mark's gospel uh, presents you with in chapter 12 that Jesus does not confess to being the King of the Jews, or does not say yes I am or no I'm not, therefore leaving us having to either sell out on sense of fair judgment, discernment, or else, not by eliminating possibilities like the person was led by the question, already slaved, marginalized, mistreated, felt commanded verbally, and was coerced. Uh, was trying to attempt to deliver a question back in response. Um, all of these, and then so I can comprehend that it later on becomes the desire of the of Herod and his queen to have the write up, being that this man was giving his life of his own volition to save the world, and you know build a new god in a sense, while preserving their precious tales of Hans Christian incest, um, and yeah, so we don't antichrists. We don't respond in kind and say that we accept that this man's murder was a gift. So I've heard a lot of bigoted things said about people who go through or struggle with suicidal thoughts and feelings. That, for instance, hypocritically and coming out of the mouths of Christians, saying that everything's just trust in a God, and everything's in his control. Um, and then you read the Bible and the horrors to which this God is finds tasteful, and yet to struggle with suicide is supposedly some ad, ad, instant admission of defeat, or but failing the country, or but these heroes that Gary Cans and Roger Tall, so they've built an ideology about trying to come up with propaganda, statements of moralist propaganda that is very pragmatic, right down to the T, and that it just marks the will for the supply of antipsychotic medications with high rebates, sustainable for frequent re-administration over and over again till the citizen's dead, and they introduce what they'll convince the citizen's family is a genome genetic disorder. So yeah, it's both been from troubleshooting arguments and experience, as an observation is that you might find if someone who even just empathizing with the rights of bisexuals, on that account, which is to say not to dismiss the community as sick, split personality, schizophrenic, and all these various things, dismissals that can and do occur in the workplace, and do occur in the workplace of healthcare. See, I'm not against Derrida and Rollo May and various existential psychoanalysts. It's true in reading these people's works, Steven Pinker, that they are not the celebrant, monist representatives of ideological or religious movements. They are kind of, they have this let's follow the truth wherever she may lead, passion for their craft that does give their works a greater ring of integrity. In on one front, idealistically been exposed to religion, while Mrs. Brennan of the O'Connor Chemist knew that she was someone I regarded with intimidation, and her first words to me directly, which were some reference to Homer Simpson. I thought it was a pretty vulgar way to introduce self, and but yeah, I'm even given the concept. So Christians lose this idea that's commonly preached upon, that if you add or subtract a single word from the what you're told is the biblical canon in Revelation, then you have it's like an unforgivable sin for which you should burn for all eternity. But that's done every time a committee sits around, reevaluates what's gone into the canon, and then as if it were fashion, bow ties, top hats, or long ties, neckties, long sleeve shirts. It's all fashion, but fashion of scripture, and that's closer to the truth than the statements in the Christian's Holy Bible are truthful. Now, once recognized as a ransom, kidnap, murder, suicide, and rapey murder. I was thinking earlier today about how what if apologists were to say that, well, Jesus was crucified nude, but he's depicted to wear a loincloth because the alternative would be to show nudity to, you know, you'd be seeing nudity from a young age. A lot of Greek statues and a lot of art does include portrayal of nudity. What's a bit of a point of confusion is that what was called their shame and cover up and hide your shame referred to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden with the leaves of apples used to cover to hide their genitals from view, and the purpose behind the crown of thorns being placed on Jesus' head are for the purposes strictly of shaming him. So the crucifixion includes that of the disclosure completely of his shame, and would therefore be there'd be no use for a loincloth. Yeah, so why, for instance, why it has it got to be through this suicide cultic kidnap, suicide, murder, bullshitly called a human sacrifice? And I've watched Christians do this and then come forward and say that this Marilyn Manson song or this Korn song is promoting. So, and you go, how have you arrived at these conclusions? But then the more you analyze it and juxtapose it, the more you realize it's the ones that got authoritative on wanting to spread and preach the gospel that didn't really, or that came to take for granted what a crucifixion process entailed on a psychological basis. And so one thing that would infuriate me is that it was a big sacrifice for me in terms of the depths I could have gone to have gotten to know my biological father and should have, because it's not really acknowledged or mentioned that it was a sacrifice for me. It was patronizing as fuck to have had family say, well, you know, you've got no father, but here's this biblical fucker. Please pray to him every night and thank him for, thank him for all of the wreckage on your family. That they could back off, and while in my case, I was goaded as if I admired the violence that went on between parents as a kid, when really what I did understand was that the logistics of the Christian religion are what mandate and endorse this sort of behavior. And it's one reason that I say things like I would oppose its moral teachings even if its theological narrative were proven to be historically true. If your religion was true, which is a gamble because there's not enough evidence to give it that much veracity, or say it has that much veracity due, yet this sacrificial attitude toward your own blood, your own family, seems to take precedence when issues could be confronted, discussed, dealt with, and instead a family will make itself look weak. So, I've had to pay the price of false accusations of violent intent when at certain times in my life I wasn't to know that what if you're taught, and this would apply to anyone, if you were taught that some violence went on between your parents, you've got their genes by logical necessity. You may go and be a violent offender without knowing that you were. Why that's a mindfuck is then why haven't you woken up every morning, having been a violent offender in the night gone by? How would you know? The mother on Rick and Morty, whose voice was by Sarah Chalk, she goes through that dilemma of not knowing if she's a clone of herself, and if her father, scientist Rick, had her cloned, and would he tell her, or would he say that she was not a clone if she was, and how is she to find out? And it's that similar sort of mindfuck, because they're trying to say that they're trying to teach you to view yourself as a person who's unaware of one's own behavior due to the inescapable results of something the person never asked for, which is their genes. And it's an insult to intelligence. But were it not for this sort of shit being dogmatically kicked around in the workplace, I'd have striven to have got my driver's license by now. A lot of, yeah. But so this whole stand back, like I'd watch myself, and it's why, in a way, it compromised my experience of puberty to the way that Tuggeranong Uniting Church were doing business in the mid-90s. People that were simultaneously thinking that the sins of the father shall be repeated on through to 3 and 4 generations as some statement of true fact in the Bible, but yet these injunctions for murdering women if they're not virgins, or invading cities but keeping virgins alive for yourselves, that isn't talked about. It just, I noticed that, I understood enough about rights then to go, well, shit, like you guys are supposedly my mentors and elders here. I was taught to show respect for elders, but one moment they're and always assuming that for the most part, except for one friend, Alani, who I would credit, she insulted my intelligence, and I feel sold out on her own what was otherwise a commendable source of display of an individual's strength of mind in not being afraid to question the youth pastor. And I think she had respectability on that front. But then why cherry pick just to indict me? And what did it make you if suppose that the violence between my parents was on my father's side caused by attrition from things like psychology, psychiatry, and the Christian religion, and then I'm denied the chance to have a relationship with my own father past kindergarten, really growing up, and then meanwhile, it's my mum who can't handle, while she'll watch surgeries on VHS cassettes, she couldn't stand the blatantly tacky fake you know, early Nightmare on Elm Street films or horror films, fictions, and yet I could tell had been raised in such a way as to have been completely pressured not to question the so-called veracity of the Christian's Holy Bible, to believe its every story when its content, if true, would be more offensive to women's rights to life, to health, to control over their reproduction, empowerment to a truly equal, true equality, and fiction and art, explicit fiction in art. It does not make sense for my mother to be to have a fear of it, while at the same time be thankful for the Christian Bible and its narratives. But so I'm assigned and accept the responsibility of this defensive role. But there was really no reason why I shouldn't have been better allowed to have gotten to know my blood father at the same time. But yeah, it has been a fucked and bumpy ride, because I watched its depreciating effects on my physical health in my teens, and I went, no. So this is I'm not being allowed to evaluate both sides of a conflict that, no matter how horrid or gruesome or violent I might have been capable of imagining it, it's still too that young to be told by anybody else, take this side or that side. But if as things happened, you were left just defending your mum, only to watch her go into fucking Christian wedding with violent Christian version 3 verse, Christian dingbat version, put enough stress on my nervous system that I can't work. I'd like, yeah. Oh, I wouldn't like to see Zabo stick up for his own erections. It would just be nice it would be a nice thought for him. Because I consider him to be someone that disrespectfully weakened the family, and for someone who's a teacher, he should have known what it was like to be inquisitive, to ask my sister what life experience was like for her, to ask me similar questions. Instead, he made me feel sick, thinking I had to pray to that fucking God just to sit down to a family meal, and now we don't associate at all, really. Once again, religion. And if you take someone unfathered, essentially, I think the imagination, otherwise the person would really come into moral and logical contest of the character of the biblical God. It is that idea that it's a psychological shadow of one's own father to some extent. But because it's an inner monologue in relation to that being, it's almost like, well, what if your father was around? What would he say about this matter? What would he think? But yeah, being assigned to the defense of my mother, and then made to attend a group where I was being told was that I would be tortured forever unless I additionally took up the responsibility of investing my complete faith and belief in what was the motive of my father's anxiety. And that's what I would have been thankful for just one good close friend that I could really trust, and I did meet her in the end during my time at the church. But it's what they don't ask that I think is so disgusting. and just to sell Jesus. It's like they they show no they show disrespect for the dead and mistreated. Um, and as far as the ethics of conversation, of debate, of polite argument go, it's whorish that the way in which that they'll speak. You know, Alanie, watching it when I visited in 2012 in Melbourne, and she's trying to investigate me in her own way. She thinks that a girl I'm considered to have been a relationship more meaningful than the chemist job easily. But the way that these activists are with their conversational etiquette, be they, and the Freemasons and the Christians of the Uniting Church had this in common. It's very whorish, which yeah, I could see why a Christian woman believing in psychology and Christianity would cross the two together and then work out that there's no better way for her to earn the love of her Savior than to assume the disposition of a whore. But Freemason males thinking that they've got the crack team frontier scientific definition of homosexual nutted down to and then claiming that Hippocrates meant anything to them. Yeah, you are better off being a sick person or a patient, because the way you're treated and what's assumed of you, and the lines that are crossed in pertaining to your personal life. It's like and then on top of it, you go, now I can only see that this will only lead to you further misjudging me just because you thought it's appropriate to have these various conversations in violation of privacy, for instance. So unless I contest you, you're going to think it's okay to keep violating my privacy. If I do contest you, you're also an authoritarian dogmatist, so you'll tell me off, and that it's not right for me to do that either. But you know, just as the evangelist does claim that they're reaching out and sending missionaries and making more Christians, the Freemasons have this. They have their own means of, you know, distanced fucking with you, distanced. And when they're claiming that their morals have come to them from their religion, they don't have psych degrees, but lied about not only having psych degrees but having military roles, not showing you a license, and not handing you any documentation to show the officiating of your employment termination before your employer sends you in your cat death threats, and then starts to begin getting the wheels into motion. I realized that they couldn't leave it so close in time proximity to the end of my work for Capital Chemist, when they started to drive forward the idea of obtaining me at a psychiatric facility. But being there and going through what that was like, and there's ways to be made in terms of argumentation for, well, I don't yet feel that I've recovered from that. I've lost flatness in my chest and rib cage. I had horrid heart cardiac reactions to these forced injections. And so if religion and psychiatry had caused this attrition and anxiety that was the cause of my father's conflict with my mother when I was 5, and I'm perennially denied the chance to try and build a relationship with him as a father and son relationship, while getting accused every which way of genetically inheriting his now thanks to their fucking recreative minds, completely calculated, predetermined intent of a walking slaughterhouse. I have no respect for Gary Cairns and Roger Toll at all. They're people who say hideous. It's not even. It's them selling things that just should not be. It's not their right to sell. It's not stock that they bought. They employed you as a member of staff, and now they have to. Now I feel filthy fucking thinking of them, but no, if I don't confront them and get word out in best circulation, so as to create more awareness about the level of corruption of which these two are apostles. I feel burdened that I already consider my investment of time into that franchise, Capital Campus, as a waste, a true waste and mistake. But yeah, women involved in sex work can be and do tend to be more polite conversationalists than these men who are like whores of ideas. And for what purpose? To complete what sale? It's not the way friends made. It's like
6 in the morning, police at my door. Fresh Adidas squeak across the bathroom floor.
So let's say we were to give the most moral leniency, benefit of the doubts to Gary and Roger. This initiative, of which Roger considered himself to be, accosting me and saying, having the audacity to say in the first place, this bullshit speech, your responsibility comes from the rebellion against your own sexuality, you're a homosexual. If he was enter it in as a hypothetical consideration that he's there he's speaking in this capacity so as to submit it for sake of example to come to terms with a homosexuality that I was perhaps taught in principle was disgusting and wrong. Now I even know that in church was a very talented musician, keyboardist, was homosexual, and I thought it was disgusting when he got told, you won't be allowed to play music in the church band unless you give up being gay. I thought he was treated disgracefully, but for there to be any impetus on their behalf or moral responsibility for them to step up and go, oh, we'll help Luke come to terms with his inner gayness. I would have to have been taught that to be hetero is the only way, for example. And as I said, I was not instructed one way or the other. And the only scenario in which I was aware of being instructed on these topics was when the Christian religion was imposed on me at the threat of torture. And that was what I had left and quit and gotten myself out of, escaped from, and quit before I ever established ties with Capital Chemist. So these two owners didn't help me to clarify any matters. They projected, essentially. Because if they had been attentive to the facts, they'd have ascertained that, well, supposing, for sake of example, that that they can't even say they had their means or their adequate proofs to understand that it was their responsibility to help me come to terms with some sort of gayness, because I've supported gay
6
friends.
in the morning, police at my door. Fresh Adidas squeak across the bathroom.
And to start to touch on these conversational topics and bring them out into exposure, is because it's a hideous sense of emotional entrapment for a person to say, or a couple of people in a business to say, we're assuming ways in which we're going to correct your course, ruling out that you're a person of choice, ruling out, and they make you feel extorted morally and emotionally in the sense that they go, as enigmatic and ambiguous as we were trying to help you. So how dare you be an ingrate, much less have the audacity to call us criminals. I'm calling them human rights criminals, and that's because that's exactly what they are, on plenty of fronts, on a sexual health front, on a religious discriminatory front. They're not well liked by the majority of their own staff, and amongst storefront managers, I was confided in enough to understand that they instill a terrible amount of fear in to pretty much to the managers. So and so this leads them all to Roger. He was of the mind that in 2007 I somehow got a friend of mine who, as I said, her relationship means more to me than all of Capital Chemist experience, except for a couple of those I kept a tight and respectful friendship with. There was never any, we'd joke around, but there was never any need for being shitty at each other, despite attrition from employment. But that aside, and so I got told I was morally responsible for my friend Laura's discharge from hospital discharge in 2007. I was seething at the time that I got hit with this charge from Roger, because I deliberately, though I was asked, though I was asked about, how to. The most that I had pointed out was that you do have the right to speak to a doctor. You need not tell me what it is that is bothering you. It's not that I'm not here for you, but I'm not I'm not going to pry into that domain of confidentiality, trust that's yours. I did not sit in on the consulting appointment prior to discharge. I did not get to catch the name of the doctor that she spoke to, whether this doctor was male or female. Uh, I deliberately omitted myself from that so that while making sure that my friend had the sense that, yeah, of course I will listen if you have anything you want to say. I just don't want you to feel that uh, you haven't got your privacy protected in having a friendship with me. Now this, as for stupid Alany, turning to me saying, you know, infuriating. I would even say you're a sellout to whatever art you used to think meant something to you. Practicing doing the Running Man, whatever. You're a sellout. To not even ask a person, what does this mean to you? What you think, unless they're a believer and they're there to get up and testify as to what did God say to you through the medium of this music video. You think an unbeliever doesn't have the right to free thinking or the right to interpret art for themselves? Instead, it's your job to interpret art and this proves everything. This proves all the points of my conclusions concerning the Gospels is that they love Jesus once he's murdered, sacrificed for them, and they enjoy his death over and over again. And it's the treatment for preserving the sanctity of their incestuous legs, prequel ancestry descent. So yeah, I'd pay attention to who would want to lead to what I would see as premature conclusions, and at the same time not ask me, well, what was your impression of this? It's especially patronizing if you know you're well past your teens, you're in your mid 20s, and you're still being patronized that much concerning the interpretation of art. But what I worked out was that since I was not present at the scene of the conflict between my parents, and since as much as I wished I could have been, and to have prevented its eventuations, there was obviously no being in the same territory as my parents on that night, so as to have had my subtle childhood impressionable mind corrupted by the direct witness of the events, because that did not happen. Now, if at the same time, what I had to realize was whether they were being misled or were fascistic in their own thinking, and given some of the sincerity in some of the Christian peers that I knew in the church, I couldn't make so many universal across the board claims concerning who amongst them were, in that Shakespearean sense, appreciative of ethics, like to thine own self be true. So yet the sense that I had a taste or an appetite for danger, an admiration or appreciation for danger, when, if anything, in terms of ideals, I was being taught that by the church, because that's what God is nothing if not violent fucker. But I really loved the Enlightenment more than Renaissance art and painting. It's impressive, but concepts that came about during the time of the Enlightenment, I found really struck a lot of chords, because I always hated the sense of being felt like you're pressed back to a corner where you have to say yes or no, or state of origin, New South Wales or Queensland. Like, you might not watch the state of origin at all, and this idea that it's a person's right to suspend judgment and say, well, I'm suspending my judgment. I'm not bowing to the modern yay or nay on every topic available. But yeah, consequentialism applied to the sorts of judgments I would have to withstand just by standing still or being me or having a sense of humor. It did lead me on to wondering, well, could it be a bisexual self-awareness, that the bisexual individual simply occurs in nature as heterosexuals, as homosexuals, and yeah, the fact that experience what has and has not been taught me, said to me at various times by various people, and aspects of courtship guidance, or lack thereof. Yeah, I absolutely think that there's merit to this, and it's something I'm studying a lot, because I think that would be something rare and unique I could address in my philosophy book, in order to make it set apart somewhat from your from average, like the majority of mainlining books on atheism. I would want to talk about topics like how a deconvert from Christianity can, and what the meaning of an antichrist is to me, can in fact make better sense of what we struggled so hard to believe, but could not do so sincerely with clear conscience. And it made better sense of biblical content through the skeptical lens of unbelief. I would talk about art as the only form of spirituality that's legitimate and really left. And yeah, the scope and meaning of atheism, logical fallacies and how to argue, false dichotomies, destroying stereotypes, things like that. But I'm trying to think about topics of address throughout the body of the book that I've not seen in another book, on the topic of unbelief and religious apostasy. Thank you.
Life science? We are bored.